A father and his 9-year-old son vanished without a trace during their insect-watching camp in the Rocky Mountains. When search teams arrived at dawn, they found the boys' breakfast still steaming hot on the camp stove. The tent was perfectly set up, their sleeping bags still warm, but both father and son had completely disappeared into the wilderness. 7 years later, a mountain climber discovered the boys' magnifying glass lodged 100 feet up in an eagle's nest on a sheer rock face. The lens was completely unscratched, as if it had been carefully placed there just moments before. But how did a child's magnifying glass end up in an impossible location? The morning of June 15th, 2016, started like any other camping adventure for David Martinez and his 9-year-old son, Tommy. They had driven 3 hours from Denver to reach their favorite campsite in Rocky Mountain National Park, a secluded spot near Bear Lake that David had been visiting since his own childhood. Tommy was what you might call an insect detective. While other kids his age were glued to video games, Tommy spent his free time with a magnifying glass, studying beetles, ants, and butterflies. His bedroom walls were covered with carefully drawn pictures of insects, each one labeled with scientific names that most adults couldn't pronounce. David, a high school biology teacher, encouraged his son's passion, seeing in Tommy the same curiosity about nature that had driven his own career choice. "Dad, look at this," Tommy called out as they finished setting up their tent. He was crouched near a fallen log, his favorite magnifying glass, a gift from his grandmother, positioned over a line of marching ants. They're carrying pieces of leaves that are 3 times their body size. David smiled, watching his son's eyes light up behind the magnifying lens. "What kind do you think they are, buddy?" "Leafcutter ants, maybe? But we're pretty far north for those." Tommy carefully sketched the insects in his field notebook, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. "I'll have to research this when we get home." The afternoon passed peacefully. Father and son hiked the nearby trails, with Tommy stopping every few feet to examine some new insect or spider. David packed their dinner, hot dogs and beans, Tommy's camping favorites, while his son organized his growing collection of specimens in small glass jars, each one carefully labeled with the time and location of discovery. As evening approached, they sat by their campfire, roasting marshmallows and talking about Tommy's plans to become an entomologist. The boy's enthusiasm was infectious, and David found himself seeing the natural world through his son's curious eyes. Every chirp, every rustle in the bushes, every flutter of wings became a mystery worth investigating. "Dad, do you think there are insects we haven't discovered yet?" Tommy asked, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. "Absolutely. Scientists estimate there are millions of insect species we haven't even found yet." Tommy's eyes grew wide. "Maybe I'll discover a new one someday." "I could name it after Mom." David's throat tightened slightly. Tommy's mother, Maria, had passed away from cancer 2 years earlier. These camping trips had become their special time together, a way to heal and bond while exploring the natural world Maria had loved so much. "She would have loved that," David said softly. "She always said you had the soul of an explorer." They stayed up later than usual, with Tommy using his magnifying glass to examine night-flying insects attracted to their lantern. A group of moths fascinated him, and he carefully drew their wing patterns in his notebook by firelight. David watched his son work, marveling at the boy's patience and attention to detail. "I think it's time for bed, Detective," David finally said around 10 p.m. "We have a big day of bug hunting tomorrow. Tommy reluctantly closed his notebook and followed his father into their tent. They said their goodnights, and David listened as his son's breathing gradually became slow and steady. The last thing David remembered was the sound of an owl hooting somewhere in the distance and the gentle rustle of wind through the pine trees. When the first search and rescue team arrived the next morning, summoned by concerned park rangers who had noticed the unattended campfire, they found something that would puzzle investigators for years to come. The campsite looked completely normal. The tent was properly zipped shut, their sleeping bags neatly arranged inside. On the camp table, 2 bowls of oatmeal sat waiting. David had apparently started making breakfast before whatever happened occurred. The oatmeal was still warm, steam rising gently in the cool mountain air. Ranger Sarah Chen, a 15-year veteran of mountain rescues, had never seen anything quite like it. "It's like they just stepped away for a moment," she told her partner, Mike Rodriguez. "But where could they have gone?" The most puzzling detail was Tommy's magnifying glass, sitting exactly where he had left it the night before, positioned over his specimen jars, ready for another day of investigation. His field notebook lay open beside it, the last page showing detailed drawings of the moths he had studied by firelight. "Look at this," Mike said, pointing to the breakfast setup. The father was clearly preparing their morning meal. The camp stove is still on low heat. The coffee pot is warm. This happened recently, maybe within the last hour or two. Sarah picked up Tommy's notebook, flipping through pages of careful insect drawings and observations. The boy's handwriting was neat and precise, each entry dated and timed. The last entry was from 9:47 p.m. the previous night. Large brown moths, possibly Geometridae family. Wingspan approximately 2 inches, attracted to lantern light. A massive search operation began immediately. Park rangers, local law enforcement, search and rescue teams, and volunteers combed every inch of the surrounding wilderness. They searched caves, ravines, dense forest areas, and mountain streams. Helicopters circled overhead, their thermal imaging cameras scanning for any sign of heat signatures. Search dogs tracked the scent as far as they could, but the trail seemed to vanish completely about 200 yards from the campsite. David's sister, Elena Martinez, arrived from Denver that afternoon, frantic with worry. She had been the emergency contact on David's camping permit, and the call from park authorities had been every family member's worst nightmare. "This doesn't make sense," she told investigators through tears. "David is the most careful person I know. He's been camping in these mountains for 30 years. He would never leave Tommy alone, not even for a minute." Elena described her brother as a devoted father who had become even more protective of Tommy after Maria's death. He planned every detail of their camping trips. He knew the area like the back of his hand. And Tommy, that boy never went anywhere without his magnifying glass. He's been obsessed with insects since he could walk. Detective Jim Hawkins from the Larimer County Sheriff's Office took over the investigation on the second day. With over 20 years of experience in mountain search and rescue operations, Hawkins had seen every type of wilderness emergency imaginable. But the Martinez case was different. In most missing persons cases in the wilderness, we find signs of what happened, Hawkins explained to the growing media presence. Equipment left behind, clothing caught on branches, footprints leading in a specific direction. Here we have nothing. It's as if 2 people simply vanished into thin air. The investigation expanded beyond the immediate search area. Detectives interviewed everyone who had been in the park that weekend, checked surveillance footage from park entrances, and investigated David's personal life for any signs of trouble. They found nothing suspicious. David was respected in his community, had no significant debts, no enemies, and no reason to disappear voluntarily with his son. Tommy's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, provided character testimony that painted a picture of a bright, happy child who adored his father and lived for their camping adventures. Tommy would come to school every Monday with stories about their weekend trips, she said. He'd bring in photographs of insects they'd found, specimens to share with the class. He was planning to present a project about Colorado mountain insects at the school science fair. The search continued for 2 weeks, with teams covering over 100 square miles of rugged mountain terrain. They found no trace of David and Tommy Martinez. No clothing, no equipment, no signs of a struggle, no indication of where they might have gone or what might have happened to them. Theories emerged and were quickly dismissed. Animal attacks seemed unlikely. There were no signs of blood or struggle, and both black bears and mountain lions typically leave evidence of their presence. The idea that they had fallen into a hidden crevice or cave system was explored extensively, with spelunking teams investigating every known underground formation in the area. Some suggested that David might have staged their disappearance, perhaps overwhelmed by grief over his wife's death and the pressure of raising Tommy alone. But this theory fell apart under scrutiny. David's bank accounts remained untouched, his car was still in the parking area, and most importantly, he would never have put Tommy in danger. As weeks turned into months, the active search was scaled back, though the case remained officially open. Elena Martinez hired private investigators and organized volunteer search parties. She offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to her brother and nephew's safe return. The campsite was eventually cleaned and reopened to other visitors, but many park rangers avoided the area. There was something unsettling about the place where 2 people had simply vanished without explanation. Some rangers reported strange feelings when patrolling the area, an inexplicable sense that they were being watched, or that something important was hidden just out of sight. Tommy's magnifying glass was returned to Elena, along with his other belongings. She kept it on her kitchen table, somehow hoping that one day her nephew would come looking for his most precious possession. Years passed with no new leads. The Martinez case became one of those unsolved mysteries that haunts everyone involved. Detective Hawkins retired, but he kept the case file on his desk at home, occasionally reviewing it for details he might have missed. Ranger Sarah Chen transferred to a different park, unable to shake the memory of that eerily pristine campsite. Elena never stopped searching. She organized annual memorial hikes in the Rocky Mountains, hoping that publicity might generate new leads. She maintained a website with photos of David and Tommy, updating it regularly with new search efforts and appeals for information. The case attracted the attention of various mystery enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists. Some suggested alien abduction. Others proposed government cover-ups or secret military experiments. Elena dismissed these theories, but she couldn't dismiss the growing certainty in her heart that something extraordinary had happened to her family. Local Ute tribe elders, when approached by investigators, spoke quietly of places in the mountains where the boundaries between worlds grew thin. They mentioned stories passed down through generations of people who walked between realities, of sacred spaces where the natural laws didn't always apply. But these were spiritual beliefs, not evidence. Then, on a crisp morning in October 2023, 7 years after David and Tommy Martinez had vanished, professional rock climber Jake Morrison made a discovery that would reignite the entire investigation. Morrison was attempting a new climbing route on a particularly challenging section of rocky cliff face, about 2 miles from the original Martinez campsite. The route was rated as extremely difficult, accessible only to experienced climbers with specialized equipment. At about 100 feet above the ground, Morrison paused to rest on a narrow ledge. "I was adjusting my gear when I noticed this massive eagle's nest built into a crevice in the rock," Morrison later told investigators. "Eagles are territorial, and I didn't want to disturb them during nesting season, but as I was about to move on, something caught the sunlight." Morrison carefully approached the nest, which appeared to be abandoned. Wedged among the twigs, feathers, and debris was something that made absolutely no sense at that height and in that location: a child's magnifying glass. "I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing," Morrison said. "It was this little magnifying glass, the kind a kid would use to look at bugs. But it was in perfect condition. The lens was crystal clear. The metal frame was unscratched. It looked like someone had placed it there yesterday." Morrison carefully extracted the magnifying glass and immediately contacted park authorities. When Ranger Chen, who had transferred back to Rocky Mountain National Park the year before, saw the familiar object, she felt chills run down her spine. "I remembered that magnifying glass," Chen said. "Tommy had been so proud of it. His grandmother had given it to him for his 8th birthday, and he took it everywhere." But how did it end up 100 feet up a cliff face in an eagle's nest? The discovery posed more questions than it answered. Professional rock climbers examined the cliff face and confirmed that the location was accessible only with advanced climbing skills and specialized equipment. There was no way a 9-year-old child could have reached that height, even with adult assistance. More puzzling was the condition of the magnifying glass itself. After 7 years of exposure to harsh mountain weather, snow, ice, wind, rain, and intense UV radiation, the object should have shown significant damage. Metal should have corroded, plastic should have become brittle and cracked, and the lens should have been scratched or clouded. Instead, the magnifying glass looked exactly as it had 7 years earlier. The lens was so clear it could still focus sunlight to a pinpoint. The metal frame showed no signs of oxidation or weather damage. Even the small rubber grip pads were intact and flexible. Elena Martinez broke down when Detective Hawkins, now consulting on the reopened case, brought her the magnifying glass. "This was Tommy's treasure," she said through tears. "He saved his allowance for months to buy a special carrying case for it. He would never have left it behind voluntarily." The discovery prompted a new round of searches in the area around the cliff where the magnifying glass was found. Teams rappelled down from above, searching every crevice and ledge. They found no other trace of David and Tommy Martinez. Forensic analysis of the magnifying glass revealed no useful evidence. There were no fingerprints. The surface had been too thoroughly exposed to the elements. There was no DNA material that could be analyzed. The object itself provided no clues about how it had ended up in an eagle's nest 100 feet above the ground. The eagle's nest was examined by wildlife biologists, who estimated it had been active for at least 5 years, based on the accumulated debris and nesting materials. This meant the magnifying glass had been incorporated into the nest sometime after the eagles had established their territory, but there was no way to determine exactly when. "Eagles are collectors," explained Dr. Susan Walsh, a raptor specialist, consulted on the case. "They'll incorporate anything shiny or interesting into their nests. but they typically collect objects from the ground or from relatively low heights. It's highly unusual for them to carry something up from a significant distance. More disturbing was the question of how an eagle could have obtained the magnifying glass in the first place. If David and Tommy had died or been injured somewhere in the mountains, their equipment should have been scattered in that location. For an eagle to find and carry the magnifying glass suggested it had been accessible to the bird, but searches of the surrounding area continued to reveal nothing. Some investigators wondered if the magnifying glass might have been planted as a hoax or cruel prank. But forensic analysis showed that it had indeed been exposed to mountain weather for an extended period, despite its pristine appearance. The pattern of wear was consistent with years of exposure, even though the damage was far less than expected. Elena Martinez returned to the area where Jake Morrison had made his discovery, standing at the base of the cliff and staring up at the spot where her nephew's most prized possession had been found. "I just want to know what happened to them," she said. "Even if it's terrible, even if they're gone, I need to know. This not knowing is destroying our whole family." Tommy's classmates, now teenagers, hadn't forgotten their young friend who had loved insects so much. They organized their own search parties during school breaks, hoping that teenage energy and enthusiasm might succeed where professional searchers had failed. They found nothing, but their dedication to finding their missing classmate kept the case alive in the public consciousness. The local media revisited the case regularly, especially around the anniversary of David and Tommy's disappearance. Investigative journalists proposed various theories, from natural disasters to human trafficking to government conspiracies. None of the theories adequately explained the evidence, or lack thereof. Meanwhile, the magnifying glass discovery had attracted the attention of researchers interested in unexplained phenomena. Some suggested that certain areas of the Rocky Mountains might be subject to unusual electromagnetic fields or gravitational anomalies that could affect the normal laws of physics. Dr. Richard Steinberg, a physicist from the University of Colorado, proposed that the pristine condition of the magnifying glass might be explained by unknown atmospheric conditions at high altitude. "We don't fully understand all the ways that extreme weather can affect different materials," he theorized. "It's possible that the specific microclimate in that eagle's nest created preservation conditions we haven't seen before." But even Dr. Steinberg admitted that his theory didn't explain how the magnifying glass had reached that location in the first place, or what had happened to David and Tommy Martinez. As the investigation entered its 8th year, Detective Hawkins made a decision that surprised everyone involved in the case. He announced that he was organizing one final, comprehensive search of the area, using new technology that hadn't been available during the original investigation. "We have ground-penetrating radar, advanced thermal imaging, and satellite mapping that can detect anomalies we might have missed 7 years ago," Hawkins explained. "If David and Tommy Martinez are somewhere in these mountains, we're going to find them." The search began in the spring of 2024, focusing on a 5-mile radius around both the original campsite and the cliff where the magnifying glass was discovered. Volunteers came from across Colorado and neighboring states, many of them parents who couldn't imagine the pain of losing a child without answers. Elena Martinez walked every trail, examined every cave, and prayed at every vista. She carried with her a photograph of David and Tommy taken during their last camping trip before Maria's death, all 3 of them smiling, with Tommy holding his beloved magnifying glass up to examine a butterfly that had landed on his father's shoulder. The massive search effort continued for 2 weeks. Teams covered terrain that had been searched multiple times before, but with new eyes and new technology. They found old mining equipment, decades-old trash left by careless campers, and the remains of various wildlife. They did not find any trace of David and Tommy Martinez. On the final day of the search, Elena Martinez stood once again at the campsite where her brother and nephew had last been seen alive. The spot looked different now. Other campers had used it countless times, and new fire rings had been built while old ones were dismantled. But she could still picture Tommy crouched by a fallen log, his magnifying glass focused intently on some fascinating insect discovery. "I know they're somewhere," she whispered to the mountain wind. "I know my Tommy is still out there, still exploring, still asking questions about the natural world. And David is with him, keeping him safe, teaching him everything he can about the mountains they both loved." As the sun set behind the peaks of the Rocky Mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples that Maria Martinez would have loved, Elena made a decision. She would never stop looking for answers, but she would also never stop celebrating the memory of the curious boy and devoted father who had vanished into these ancient mountains. The magnifying glass, Tommy's most precious possession, was now displayed in Elena's living room, alongside photographs of all the family camping trips, all the insect drawings, and all the scientific notebooks that chronicled a young boy's passionate exploration of the natural world. Sometimes Elena would pick up the magnifying glass and hold it up to the light, marveling at its impossible perfection after 7 years in an eagle's nest 100 feet above the ground. Through the crystal-clear lens, she could see the world the way Tommy had seen it, full of mysteries waiting to be solved, full of questions waiting to be answered. And in the Rocky Mountains, where the morning mist still rises from hidden valleys and the evening shadows still conceal ancient secrets, the mystery of David and Tommy Martinez remains unsolved. Somewhere in those peaks and forests, their story continues. A story that began with a father's love, a boy's curiosity, and a magnifying glass that defied every law of nature to find its way home. Park rangers still patrol the area where the Martinez family vanished. New campers still pitch their tents in the same spots where David and Tommy once roasted marshmallows and studied insects by firelight. The mountains keep their secrets, as they always have, waiting patiently for the day when someone might finally discover what really happened during that mysterious night in June 2016. But until that day comes, Tommy's magnifying glass serves as a reminder that some mysteries are bigger than our understanding. Some questions are more important than their answers, and some love stories are strong enough to transcend even the deepest mountain silence. Elena Martinez continues to organize memorial hikes every year on the anniversary of their disappearance. And every year, she carries Tommy's magnifying glass with her, hoping that somehow, somewhere in the vast wilderness of the Rocky Mountains, her nephew might still be out there, exploring, discovering, and seeing the natural world through the clear lens of infinite curiosity. The case remains open. The questions remain unanswered. And high above the tree line, where eagles soar and ancient rocks hold their secrets, the Rocky Mountains keep watch over a mystery that may never be solved. But there was something Elena didn't know. Something that would have changed everything if she had discovered it just one day earlier. On the morning after Elena's final memorial hike, a geological survey team working in a remote section of the Rocky Mountains made a discovery that defied explanation. Dr. Amanda Foster, a geologist from Colorado State University, was collecting rock samples from a previously unexplored cave system when her equipment detected an anomaly. "The readings made no sense, Doctor," Foster later explained to investigators. "My instruments were showing electromagnetic signatures that shouldn't exist in natural rock formations. It was like the stone itself was somehow active." Deep inside the cave, approximately 300 feet underground and nearly 4 miles from the original Martinez campsite, Dr. Foster's team found something that made them question everything they knew about geology, physics, and the nature of reality itself. There, carved into solid granite that geological dating confirmed was millions of years old, were 2 perfect human handprints, one large, one small. Beside them, etched with impossible precision into the ancient stone, were detailed drawings of insects, beetles, ants, butterflies, and moths. The artistic style was unmistakably that of a child, but the preservation was perfect, as if the drawings had been made yesterday. But that wasn't the strangest part. When Dr. Foster's team analyzed the handprints using advanced 3D scanning technology, they made a discovery that sent shockwaves through both the scientific community and law enforcement agencies. The handprints were an exact match for David and Tommy Martinez. Detective Hawkins, pulled out of retirement once again, stood in the cave with Doctor Foster, staring at evidence that challenged everything he thought he understood about the Martinez case. "How is this possible?" he asked, his voice echoing in the underground chamber. "These rock formations predate human civilization by millions of years." Dr. Foster shook her head, her scientific training warring with the evidence before her eyes. "According to every test we can perform, this granite was formed during the Precambrian era, but somehow, impossibly, these handprints and drawings are embedded in the stone as if they were created when the rock was still molten. The insect drawings were examined by entomologists who confirmed that they depicted species native to the Rocky Mountain region. More unsettling, several of the drawings showed insects that had only been discovered and classified within the past 5 years, species that Tommy Martinez could never have known about during his lifetime. Elena Martinez was brought to the cave under strict secrecy. When she saw her brother's handprint and her nephew's artistic work preserved in ancient stone, she collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "It's them," she whispered. "Tommy drew insects exactly like this. But how is this possible?" The discovery prompted a classified investigation involving federal agencies, university researchers, and theoretical physicists. The cave system was sealed off from the public while teams of scientists attempted to understand what they had found. Dr. Marcus Webb, a quantum physicist from MIT, proposed a theory that sounded like science fiction, but offered the only possible explanation for the evidence. What if the Martinez family didn't just disappear in space, but in time? He suggested during a classified briefing. What if whatever happened to them somehow transported them to a different temporal period, perhaps millions of years in the past? The theory was met with skepticism, but no one could offer a better explanation. The handprints were definitely human, definitely fresh despite being embedded in ancient rock, and definitely matched the missing father and son. Meanwhile, other strange phenomena began manifesting around the cave site. Park rangers reported unusual animal behavior, eagles flying in perfect formations, insects gathering in patterns that resembled Tommy's scientific drawings, and an unexplained aurora-like light visible only on clear nights above the cave entrance. Jake Morrison, the climber who had discovered Tommy's magnifying glass, volunteered to lead exploration teams deeper into the cave system. Using advanced spelunking equipment, they discovered chamber after chamber filled with impossible artifacts, modern camping gear embedded in million-year-old limestone, footprints in geological strata that shouldn't exist, and most mysteriously, fresh water in underground pools that seemed to flow upward, defying gravity. "It's like the entire cave exists outside normal space and time," Morrison reported. "Our instruments go haywire down there. Compasses spin wildly, GPS devices fail, and several team members reported feeling like they were being watched by unseen presences." Elena Martinez insisted on joining the exploration teams, despite the obvious dangers. "If there's any chance that David and Tommy are somehow still alive, still accessible through this place, I have to try to reach them," she declared. "They're my family. I won't abandon them." During her third descent into the cave system, Elena experienced something that changed her understanding of her family's fate forever. In a chamber deep underground, she found Tommy's field notebook, not a copy or replica, but the actual notebook she had seen returned with his belongings 7 years earlier. The notebook was sitting open on a natural stone ledge, as if someone had just finished reading it. But when Elena examined the pages, she discovered entries that had never been there before. New insect drawings, new observations, new scientific notes written in Tommy's careful handwriting. The most recent entry was dated just 3 days earlier. "Dad and I found a new species today. It glows in the dark and seems to exist in multiple places at once. I think we're learning things about nature that no one has ever discovered before. Tell Aunt Elena we're safe and we're still exploring. The mountains have shown us secrets that go deeper than time itself." Elena's hands trembled as she read her nephew's impossible message. Somehow, somewhere, Tommy was still alive, still exploring, still making scientific discoveries alongside his devoted father. But they were existing in a place and time that defied every law of physics and logic. As she prepared to leave the cave, Elena heard something that made her heart stop. The distant sound of a child's laughter echoing through the stone corridors, followed by a man's voice saying, "Look at this one, Tommy!" "I've never seen anything like it," she called out, her voice breaking with emotion. "David! Tommy! It's Elena! Can you hear me?" The cave fell silent, but as Elena made her way back toward the surface, she found one final gift waiting for her. A small pile of perfectly preserved wildflowers, arranged in the pattern of Tommy's favorite insect diagram, with a note written in David's familiar handwriting. "We love you, Elena. We're exactly where we need to be." Elena Martinez emerged from the cave that day with a peace she had never expected to find. Her family was lost to her in the conventional sense, but they were not gone. Somewhere in the mysterious intersection of time and space that existed deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, a father and son continued their eternal camping trip, exploring wonders that existed beyond the boundaries of ordinary reality. The cave was eventually sealed by government order, classified as a national security site due to its unexplained properties. But Elena Martinez continues her annual memorial hikes, carrying Tommy's magnifying glass and knowing that somewhere in the vast mountain wilderness, her family's story continues in ways that transcend death, time, and the limitations of the physical world. And sometimes, on perfectly clear mountain nights, hikers in the Rocky Mountains report seeing strange lights in the sky and hearing the distant sound of a child's excited voice calling out, "Dad, come look at this!" I think we just discovered something amazing. The magnifying glass sits in Elena's living room, still crystal clear, still perfect, still holding the secrets of a mystery that bridges the gap between the possible and the impossible, between loss and eternal love, between the world we know and the infinite wonders that lie just beyond our understanding.